Welcome everybody to the third in our series of talks on Vermont history. Ira Allen was a complicated person and now almost unknown amongst the list of early Vermont settlers and heroes. While he appears on the surface as a person interested in uniting a loosely knit group of townships, Allen evolved into a land speculator and a political gadfly. Kevin Graffagnino will explain all of this with material from his new book. He's had a long career delving into Vermont history. Once curator of the Vermont History Collection at UVM, he has also been director of Vermont Historical Society. He's written 15 books on Vermont history and is a collector of historical books and maps and various Vermont topics. There are only 4 known originals of what is referred to as the Bernard Romans map that you see here. Bernard Romans, a Dutchman, made it in 1778, and it was the first map with the words State of Vermont. It has a unique orientation, which Kevin will explain later. His wish is to find one of the originals, so if anyone's cleaning out a closet and comes across the original, give him a ring. And now I'll introduce Kevin Graffagnino.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very fond of this map. Once you get used to north being sideways, it makes sense, but it is the first map to show Vermont as Vermont. It's a political statement that Vermont exists, it has a right to exist, and that people outside of Vermont ought to pay attention. And if you have one in your attic and would like to give it to me, I'll take it. If you'd like to sell it to me, I'll pay you at least 10% of what it's worth. So we have 2 commercial announcements before our regularly scheduled program. One is that we're having a sale on Ira Allen today. It's $25 in a bookstore. I will sell you one for $20 today. Polly and my good friend Howard Coffin tell me that Bridgewater is both the most literate town in Vermont and the most book-buying town in Vermont. And this one, much more importantly, how many people here collect something? Anything? Okay. How many people here are grandparents? All right, you are my 2 target audiences. I've been collecting Vermont history since I was 17 years old. I'm now 70. So that's 53 years I've been doing this. I need to see some successors. I need to see some young people doing this. This is a guide to why you should collect Vermont history. Vermont books, Vermont maps, Vermont pamphlets, prints, etc. It's 154 examples of things you should collect, you should covet if you like Vermont history, little essays, illustrations, etc. This one is $45 in a bookstore. I'll sell it to you for $40. Unless you think I am some shameless grifter. This one costs me $15. So I make $5 on every one I sell. This one costs me $40. So I make nothing on every copy I sell. And yes, as my wife has pointed out, our Kevin is a financial genius, and it is a miracle that Harvard has not called me down to lecture on strategies for bookselling. Now, these I make no money on. However, if you go to my website, Make America Graffagnino Again, I will sell you coffee mugs, keychains, T-shirts, Bitcoin, little gold-colored ingots, all with my picture on them, because I understand that's how leadership works in America these days. All right. Enough stand-up comedy. Our subject today is Ira Allen. I started a Vermont Life article. You all remember Vermont Life, our state magazine, 40 years ago, with the catchphrase, for most Vermonters, Ira Allen is a hard founding father to love. And what I meant by that is that, like most Americans, we would like to revere our founding generation. We like them pure, wonderful, saintly, want to put them on pedestals, name buildings after them. We love Thomas Chittenden. He's our George Washington, first governor, guiding the ship of state from independence to statehood. We name counties, towns, medical centers after Thomas Chittenden. We absolutely adore Ethan Allen. Ethan is our Daniel Boone, our Davy Crockett. He's the big, rough, tough frontier hero who beats up the Yorkers and saves Vermont, etc. We name military units and laundromats and highways and just about anything else you can think of after Ethan Allen. He's the identity of early Vermont for most of us. And if you've heard of an early Vermonter outside the state, it's Ethan Allen, without any question. Ira Allen, who I would argue is just as important in 18th century Vermont as those two titans, if he's got a national counterpart, it's Aaron Burr. Another early American leader who reaches too high, who's too ambitious, who's not well liked or respected in his own time, and who's viewed by history as somebody, oh boy, he's unsavory. My whole point today is that doesn't matter. I don't care whether you like Ira Allen. I'm not that fond of him myself. I think young Ira is an admirable person. Older Ira goes down some dark paths out of desperation. I don't care. You don't have to like him, but you've got to have him in the picture. You can't leave him out of 18th century Vermont because he is so involved in everything that if you leave him out because you're not that fond of him, you're going to have a very incomplete picture of our state's early decades. Ira Allen is 19 years old when he moves up from western Connecticut. The Allens are from Litchfield County, Connecticut, up to what is known as the New Hampshire Grants, most of the territory having been granted by Benning Wentworth, governor of New Hampshire. And in 1770, when he arrives, his older brothers are all here, and they are all firmly on the Yankee side of the Yankee versus Yorker dispute. The question is, which government, New York on the west, New Hampshire on the east, owns Vermont, is going to govern Vermont when it gets settled? The Allens are Yankee all the way. Benning Wentworth land is cheaper. New Hampshire has a town-based system of government. New York is more expensive with their fees. New York is county-based, and New York is landlord-tenant-based. The Yankees who move here want to own their own farms. And under New York, that's going to be much more difficult. So you all know Ethan Allen creates the Green Mountain Boys in 1770 when New York rules that no New Hampshire land grant is valid in this state, which is a serious blow to the Allens and their neighbors and the other Yankees. Ethan rides around at the head of the Green Mountain Boys like the Hells Angels riding into Bridgewater, and you don't have any police to call. There's no authority. There's no way to stop them till they decide to leave. The Green Mountain Boys are a very effective force at stopping New York from governing east of the Hudson River. Ira doesn't take that kind of a role. Ethan is 6'2", 240. He can beat up anybody on the grants. He's Shaquille O'Neal size for the 18th century. He hits you, you know it. You want him at your back in a bar fight. Ira's 5'6", about 125. His best punch wouldn't dent a mosquito. You don't want Ira fighting for you physically. But Ira looks around. He's ambitious. And he says, unsettled land, lots and lots of land speculation. Most of the owners are in Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, southern New England. And what do they need to get their land sold, settled, divided, etc.? They need a land surveyor. You can't start your farm if you don't know where it is. You need a land surveyor to come up here and look over the town of Bridgewater and say, all right, Mr. Smith's land is here, Mr. Jones' land is there. Ira goes back to Connecticut. He spends 3 whole weeks in the winter of 1770-71 studying under a land surveyor and declares himself a master surveyor. Now, I know some land surveyors. It's a pretty complicated field, and they have told me that 3 weeks and you're a master surveyor, about the equivalent of 1 semester at UVM med school and you're a brain surgeon. This doesn't stop Ira. For the rest of his life, master surveyor is one of the titles he hangs on to. And he starts taking commissions from the landowners and speculators down south to come up, lay out their townships, maybe a town green, et cetera. Where are the mill sites? Mostly, he's working north of Rutland, in the northwestern quadrant of the state. He is gaining an unparalleled familiarity with where the good land is. There's crummy land, there's good land. Ira Allen knows in every township that he surveys exactly what the difference is. He takes his fees in land rather than in money. So he's building a portfolio at no cost to himself. He's also gaining a reputation as a young man. He's 20, 21 years old. As a young man, you keep your hand on your wallet when you're dealing with him financially. And he tells a story about himself decades later. He comes up here to survey the town of Mansfield, which is today Stowe and Underhill. And he finds that the land he owns is the top of Mount Mansfield, which in a pre-Volvo, pre-tourist age is not worth a darn. You can't farm it, you can't do anything with it. But he goes back and he tells the proprietors who hired him, I will sell any land I own up there except my Mansfield land. And they're intrigued. And they say, why is that? He says, because it is covered in gumwood trees. Well, I've been on the top of Mount Mansfield. It's covered in rock. 8 months of the year, it's covered in snow and ice. There ain't no gumwood trees, in the first place, because there is no such thing as a gumwood tree. The proprietors are confused, and they say, well, we don't understand. He says, a gumwood tree, it's a hardwood. It's much like the cherry tree. So it's very valuable for making furniture and paneling in your mansions. By the time he's done, the proprietors have bought his mountaintop at a profit. They have given him land in what is today Stowe Village, and he's a happy little surveyor. And youngest, smallest of the Allen brothers, though he was, his brothers call him Stub, which gives you a sense of how they view little Ira. Ethan is 14 years older, so there's quite an age gap in these guys. Even though he's young, even though he's small, he's the one who comes up with the family plan for empire. He says to his brothers, another meeting back in Litchfield County in the winter, this would be 1772-3. He says, you guys have got it wrong. You've been buying in what are today Rutland, Bennington, Windham, Windsor counties. That's not it. The future is the rivers that flow into Lake Champlain and then everything north to Canada along the lake. We buy those mill sites. We will move goods by water because the roads are atrocious in the 18th century, and Lake Champlain flows north. You're going to trade with Canada. We dominate those towns and the mill sites because every town is going to need a grist mill, a sawmill, a forge of some kind. They're all powered by water. There's no electricity. And Ira convinces his brothers. This is the plan. And they found the Onion River Land Company. It's Allen Brothers and cousin Remember Baker. And they divest themselves of the southern Vermont lands and start buying from Barrie to Lake Champlain, Swanton, et cetera, the Lamoille River, and the lakefront, Chittenden, Grand Isle, Franklin counties. By the time the war starts in 1775, the American Revolution, they own over 200,000 acres of northwestern Vermont. They are the biggest land speculators in the state, or what's going to be the state. The war comes, and it derails for a while any plans of settling northwestern Vermont, because with the British in Canada, the Champlain Valley is unsafe for American settlement. Thomas Chittenden has a farm in Williston, just outside of Burlington. He moves all the way back down to Arlington to spend the war in safety. You don't settle north of Rutland, or the British and Tory and Indian raids are going to scoop you up and take you back to Canada as a prisoner. But the war also gives the settlers on the grants, the Yankees, an opportunity. They take the example of the rhetoric of revolution, the colonies breaking away from England and using Thomas Paine and the rights of man and the Declaration of Independence and all that beautiful prose, and they say, if you guys can break from England, we can break from New Hampshire and New York. Let's declare our own state. You've declared your own nation. We'll do it in miniature. And they create first the state of New Connecticut in January of 1777, becoming the state of Vermont in the summer of 1777. First addition to the 13 colonies. Ira Allen becomes one of the 3 or 4 most important leaders of independent Vermont. You'd have expected Ethan, because Ethan loved leadership, controversy, fights. But Ethan's military genius that he was goes and gets himself captured at Montreal. In September of 1775, he tries to capture the city from the British with 250 men. It doesn't go well, and he's captured. He spends the next 2.5 years in British prisons in England and in New York. So he's out of the picture. Thomas Chittenden rises. He becomes the first governor. Heman Allen, the second brother, would have been a logical choice. Everybody who wrote about him said, honest, dependable, smart, someone you could trust, someone who people would follow politically. Heman goes to the Battle of Bennington, gets heat stroke, and dies the next year. So if there's going to be an Allen participating at the highest levels, it has to be Ira. And he's only in his mid-20s at this point. He's not a mature political leader with a reputation. But he throws himself into the Vermont cause because New Hampshire's not happy, New York is not happy, the Continental Congress is not happy. This revolution within a revolution is bad stuff if you're an American political leader. Ira becomes secretary to Governor Chittenden. Chittenden had wonderful attributes. He is wise, he is smart, people will follow him. He is barely literate. We have some letters at UVM that he wrote himself, and it's as if your 9-year-old grandchild wrote them. He could not express himself on paper without a scribe, and that's what Ira does. He translates Chittenden's verbal words into substantive words on paper. So that's important. He becomes the first state treasurer, which means basically that the treasury rides around in his saddlebags. There's no building, there's no staff, there are no 500 people working in the Vermont Department of Finance. Ira is it all. Everything that flows through Vermont finances, Ira controls. He becomes the first ambassador for Vermont. Vermont has no military as an independent state. We're going to win our battles by talking, by negotiating. And Chittenden sends Ira out with great regularity, New York, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Continental Congress, to plead Vermont's case. So this is important stuff for a man in his early to mid-20s. Most importantly to Ira, he becomes the state surveyor general. Benning Wentworth granted about 2/3 of Vermont. That left about 1/3, millions of acres, for Vermont to grant to charge fees for selling the land so you didn't have to have state taxes. Imagine no state taxes in Vermont. Your government is much more popular than if you're trying to impose taxation. The Surveyor General is in charge of this process. You want to have a township granted, some space that Benning Wentworth missed, you go to Ira Allen and you tell him what you need, what you want, what's he going to get out of it. And Ira gets land in most of the townships, the good land in particular, because he knows where the good land is, in many of the townships that Vermont grants. Now, I would argue that putting the biggest land speculator in Vermont in charge of land speculation in Vermont would be like taking a billionaire with billions in federal contracts and asking him to reduce the size of government in Washington. Oh, wait a minute, we do that. Ira profits from this. Ira drives two horses during the Revolution and independence. The state of Vermont's horse and Ira's horse are going side by side, lickety-split down the road. Okay. The most controversial thing that Ira does during the Revolution is his leadership involvement in what are known as the Haldeman negotiations. In 1780, it's not clear who's winning the American Revolution. We've had some victories, the British have had some victories. It's up in the air. England looks at the situation and says, Vermont. They say they're independent. They've begged to get into the Union several times, and Congress has always said, not during the war, not while New York objects, not while we're too busy with something more important. How about we take them back into the British Empire? We make them a province, we give them their own government, we confirm the Benning Wentworth titles and grants. We split Vermont off from the Revolution. We have further control of Lake Champlain and the Champlain Valley as a military corridor, and maybe we win the war, because maybe some other states will follow suit. So the British send a spy up to Bennington County to talk to Ethan Allen, the only Vermonter they've ever heard of, because Ethan was a prisoner. Ethan was a rock star in England. He's a prisoner. He's odd, he's strange, he's bombastic. The British love him when he's there as a prisoner of war. He writes a best-selling autobiography, The Captivity of Ethan Allen, which rivals Thomas Paine's pamphlets for sales in America. So they know who he is. Spy says to Ethan, what do you think? And Ethan says, I don't want to be a Benedict Arnold. And Arnold had just been caught at this point, almost captured, but he flees to the British warship. And Ethan goes on and says, well, I don't want to be an Arnold, but it's an interesting idea, isn't it? We should talk about it. So a small group of Vermont leaders, Chittenden, Ethan Allen, the Fay brothers from Bennington, and Ira Allen, are in on this treasonous activity. Because if the Americans catch you negotiating with the enemy, then you're in serious trouble. Now, if you read any biography of Ethan Allen, and there are half a dozen published in the last century, every single author is going to say Ethan was in charge. Ethan was the king, the others were just these little character actors and role players who did what Ethan said. I just don't buy that. I think it slights some of the other leaders in Vermont. It elevates Ethan too high. And I know if I'm putting my neck in a noose to commit possible treason, I don't want the loudest talker, the heaviest drinker, the biggest braggart in the state of Vermont as my point guy. I want somebody who can sit in a room and afterwards people say, oh, was he there? I didn't notice him. I want somebody sneaky, sly. I want somebody who can negotiate for me without getting caught. I want Ira Allen. And Thomas Chittenden, as governor, makes Ira the point man. Ira's the one who goes up north to talk with the British at the northern end of Lake Champlain. He's the one who sits down with them for days and talks to Frederick Haldeman's negotiators, Haldeman is the Governor General of Canada. He controls the military. He's the one that England deputizes to run the affair. From the start, the British negotiators do not trust Ira. They write to Haldeman almost from the beginning, we don't like him, we don't trust him, he is shifty, it's like trying to nail Jell-O to a wall to get a straight answer out of him. And Haldeman keeps writing back, keep going. The prize is worth the effort, and until you know that he's lying to you, we're going through with this. And Ira keeps talking. He gets them, he gets concessions, he gets promises, but he avoids making any himself, and he avoids coming back from Lake Champlain and saying publicly, hey, look, we're about to rejoin the British Empire. Because the reality is that I don't think most Vermonters would have gone along with it. Most Vermonters were Americans waiting to become part of the Union. They were not Vermonters first, we'll pick whatever side we prefer. Now, at least a third of the people in America undoubtedly were looking at the war and saying, soon as I know who wins, that's the side I'm on. This is human nature. But the Allens are smart enough to know that most Vermonters do not share their financial interests. Vermont does not need to trade with Canada except up in the northwest quadrant, which the Allens mostly own. It's a big deal to the Allen brothers that we get a good deal out of Canada. So Ira is walking this tightrope, which, again, now he's 29, almost 30 years old. Requires skill, daring, rhetorical flexibility. Finally, in the fall of 1781, after a year of this, Haldeman loses patience. He sends an army of 1,500 regular soldiers south to the southern end of Lake Champlain, and they have with them a proclamation welcoming Vermont back into the British Empire. So it's kind of fish or cut bait time for the Allens and Thomas Chittenden. If that proclamation gets released, you either flee to the British lines or you try to get Vermonters to rejoin England. So this is a bad time. Furthermore, the legislature they know that Ira's gone back and forth. They know that Haldeman stopped the military raids into Vermont, and he's giving us back prisoners. He's treating us like an ally, like a friend. And the patriots in the Vermont legislature are quite suspicious. They call Ira in and say, in open session, i.e. there are public people in the galleries, you're going to tell us what's going on. Well, Ira, this is going to be difficult with the public watching, especially since he knows that Haldeman has sent 2 British spies down to be in the gallery. Ira gives one speech to the 2 audiences and makes them both happy. The American patriots think he's an American patriot. The British spies think he's about to turn Vermont over to the British. And Ira writes about this years later. Is it not curious to see 2 opposing parties, each believing what they wish to believe and thereby deceiving themselves? Yeah, that is curious. But it's also a tribute to Ira's backbone of titanium and his willingness to walk that tightrope. But fall of 1781, the British Army is there with the proclamation, and it's the edge of disaster for the Allens. And then news comes from Virginia. Cornwallis has surrendered at Yorktown. The war is over. There's no chance the British are going to send any more armies across the Atlantic to continue this fight. And the Allens are saved. Haldeman takes his army back to Canada, proclamation included. And from day one, Ira starts controlling the narrative. We were brave American patriots. We tricked the British in Canada. We deceived them No military raids on northern New York, northern Vermont, northern New Hampshire. We won the war for America. And by God, we want credit for it. And it works, at least here in Vermont, for the next 150 years. You couldn't stand in front of an audience until the 1950s and say, yeah, I think the Allens at least were serious about it as an option. As Ethan said, Congress closed the door to the South, England opened the door to the North. We have to think about whether to go through it. And I think for the Allens, because Congress had said you have to wait, and the odds are against our voting in your favor when this is resolved because New York is so powerful, I think they were willing to think about it. I know Ira was willing to think about it because for his dreams, that was the best answer. He wasn't going to trade with New York City or with Boston or Albany. He was going to trade with Montreal and Quebec when the war was over. But again, Ira writes 5 to 10 times more than all of the other 18th century Vermont commentators put together. Never found a Thomas Chittenden pamphlet. A few things that Ethan wrote. Stephen Rowe Bradley writes a pamphlet. Isaac Tickner doesn't write. Ira just keeps the printing press going, winning his battles by persuading people and convincing people. So the war ends. Treaty of Paris, 1783? It's like letting a dam loose. No military threat from Canada anymore. We're the 14th state. Canadians are our friends again. And settlers pour into northern Vermont. It's just thousands of people moving up into the northern half of the state. So it is golden time for the Allens, for the dream of what Ira calls the country my soul delighted in. The Champlain Valley, you are going to see those towns grow, you're going to see commerce and trade, and you're going to see mills being put up on Ira's mill sites. The dream is about to come true. Now Ira gets distracted. He moves up, he spends the winter down in Bennington County, Sunderland. There's a historic marker outside his house, which is now an inn in Sunderland. He moves up to the falls of the Winooski River. If you know Burlington and Winooski at all, what is today Winooski City was then part of the town of Colchester. That falls is great mill site for industry and for anything else you want. Ira establishes ownership, mill sites, builds a house up where the Eagle Block is in Winooski City. And it's a great time, but gets distracted. 1791, we join the Union in the spring, 14th state. The fall meeting of the legislature, everybody knows they're going to charter a university because a real state has a real university. This is a mark of pride. The other thing that will come soon is you got to have a state prison. So these are economic drivers for whatever town they exist in. The only question with where will the University of Vermont be? Where will it be located? And the legislature makes it known, well, it's a bidding war, guys. Bennington wants it, Windsor wants it, Woodstock wants it, Williamstown, Rutland, etc. How much will you pay? How much will you provide in free buildings, free land? A little cash would be nice so we could hire a president, etc. And the towns get together and they're furiously bidding against each other. And the top bid is 400 pounds. It's a lot of money in 1791. And Ira looks at that and says, ha, adds a zero. I'll do 4,000, but you're putting it in Burlington, most of which he owns. And the legislature says, bidding's over, sold to the little short guy back there. Charters the university, Burlington, Vermont. How many people here are either UVMers or UVM parents? Okay, most of your kids couldn't get in, I got it. Ha ha ha. My family has 8 degrees from UVM, so we kind of bleed green and gold. Ira donates the land. You know the campus at all, the green, Waterman, that's all Ira acreage. And he says, that's 1,500 pounds. Okay, great. The new board of trustees say, when's the 2,500 left coming? In cash, please? Ira says, soon. Check is almost in the mail. He never pays it. He wants to. He believes in the university. He believes in education as the way that common folk will rise. And he says, he writes a memo. He asks the legislature to change the name to Allen University while the $2,500 is still unpaid. And he says, I did not create the university to educate the sons of rich men. I created the university to educate the sons of farmers and mechanics and little folk, as it were. He believes in little d democracy. He wants to pay, but he can't. He just doesn't have any cash flow. And again, I'm UVM grad. I worked for UVM for 17 years. I raised money for UVM. I donated to UVM. And I think it's kind of ironic that UVM's highest level of giving is the Ira Allen Society. Because I bet you anything, I go to Waterman or Grassmount tomorrow morning and say, I'll give you $25 million. I mean, I know they're going to give me the hockey tickets and the mug and the little scarf, the green and gold. But if I don't actually pay the $25 million, I think they'll take my name off the building eventually. So, but he wanted it. He gets married in the 1780s. He waits till he's 38 years old, and he marries Jerusha Enos, who's 25 years old. But I don't see that any of these little detours deflect Ira from the grand plan. Levi Allen, I think he's the third or fourth brother. Amiable, congenial, a lifelong drinker of vast proportions, and a failure at everything. If Levi's got his hand in it, you can be sure it's going down the drain. But he's lovable. He writes these letters to his wife, Nancy, the most long-suffering woman in New England. The sun, the moon, the stars do not shine as bright when we're apart, dear Nancy. I cannot breathe without you in the next room. Wonderful. Ira signs his letters to Jerusha, your friend Ira Allen. And I can do better than that. So the plan with Brother Levi, who had been a Tory during the Revolution, so the British like him. Levi sets up a trading post at St. John on the Richelieu River in Canada. He's the Canadian side of the business. Ira is at the falls at Colchester, Winooski, and the plan is you're going to send the products of the northern agricultural frontier, grain, potash, liquor made from grain, and particularly lumber. As you clear your farms, you're going to have a lot of trees. North to Canada. You put them on giant rafts and you float with the current to the northern end of Lake Champlain, into the Richelieu, to the St. Lawrence to the city of Quebec, the largest city in North America and the biggest commercial entrepot for the Allens. You'll make money selling our stuff. You will bring back the manufactured goods that Vermonters need but can't make. They have no factories. There's no way to manufacture anything. You'll make money both ways, and your dream will be realized. You'll develop your 250,000 acres at your own pace, and the family will be the wealthiest family in northern New England. Well, it's a great plan. That doesn't work. It falters on three principal problems. One, the Richelieu River is a bad highway. It has rapids when the water's high in the spring and your rafts may get busted. It has shallows in the summer when the water is low and your rafts can't go over. So as a commercial highway, it's real inconsistent. Two, we're now under American trade agreements and American foreign relations. So you get your goods to the northern end of Lake Champlain, and the British customs officers look at you and give you, maybe one of three responses. We like you, go on through. We don't like you very much. How much are you going to pay us to let you through? We really don't like you. And they throw all the goods off the raft into the water. This hurts continuity and the bottom line. And finally, and worst, what you do get to Quebec, the Quebec merchants have you. They know you cannot float back against the current, and they know you can't take a raft across the Atlantic. So they give you 2 cents on the dollar for your products. And Ira's letters are full of denunciations of the stinkers at Quebec City and how badly they're treating him. So by the mid-1790s, he's drowning in red ink. He has over 200,000 acres in his own name. Most of his brothers have died by now, so he took their shares of the Onion River Land Company. But he doesn't have any cash. And the solution today is obvious. You sell half the land. You get some money. You reduce your dream to, I'll be well-to-do. And no, he won't do it. He doesn't see that. Instead, one of the things I like about Ira, there's always a plan. It maybe look like disaster to you and me, but never to Ira. He goes to Boston. He mortgages his Franklin County and Chittenden County lands. He takes loans out on it. He doesn't sell them. Puts the gold in the false bottom of a steamer trunk, and he sails across the Atlantic to London. First time he's ever left North America, really one of the few times he's ever been anywhere. And he goes to London, and he asks for an audience with the British government, secretary for the colonies or something like that. And they keep him waiting. He goes over with the new title, General Ira Allen. Chittenden made him a major general in the state militia to make him sound important. And he gets to London, and this does him no good whatsoever. The Brits don't know who his grandfather was. He's not related to any aristocrats. He doesn't dress very well. They remember the Haldeman negotiations, and he gets nowhere for weeks on end. Finally, they let him in to talk to some functionary, and he says, here's the plan. England and Vermont are going to build a canal around the pesky parts of the Richelieu. We are going to connect Lake Champlain directly with the St. Lawrence River, and Burlington is going to be a seaport. I am going to take seagoing vessels from Burlington to England to sell our products, to bring back your products, and I am never stopping in Quebec City again in my life. But it's a great plan, guys. England will prosper. You'll dominate the trade of northern New England. Vermont will prosper. Well, sure, the Allens will prosper, but it's not why I'm doing it. They keep him waiting more and more. As he puts it, they kept me dancing attendants in outer offices, i.e. he's sitting out there in the waiting room with the secretary. And finally, they let him in again, and they say, this really is a pretty good plan, but if we do it, what in the world do we need you for? Why would we want you to be involved? Well, this is just awful for Ira. You or I sneak back across the Atlantic and hope to salvage something. No way. Plan A doesn't work for Ira. There's always plan B, which is the exact opposite way of achieving the same thing. You can't deal with England, 1796, what do? You cross the English Channel and you go to France, England's greatest enemy in the world. You go to Paris, the revolution has happened. France is ruled by a three-man directory. They've beheaded every aristocrat they could find, their dogs, their servants, etc. And Ira gets a hearing. He presents himself as a dedicated democratic revolutionary, and he gets in to talk to the directory, and he says, guys, for years now, you've been talking about liberté, égalité, fraternité, exporting democracy to the rest of the world. No more kings, no more monarchies. How about we start with Canada? Your French-Canadian brethren, by far the majority of the population, have been under the boot of British tyranny since the end of the French and Indian War, when England stole Canada from you. I say we send guns over across from France to the United States. I recruit 10,000 Green Mountain Boys. We storm the small British garrisons and we take Canada back, and we create the Democratic Republic of United Columbia. And he says, guys, you and I, we're sophisticated philosophers. We don't need symbols, but the little people, they need stuff like that. So he gives them a flag. He says, United Columbia will be red, white, blue, and green. The French tricolor, the United States, and presumably green for Vermont and the Green Mountain Boys. And France will send an army, a smaller army, over in the spring so that Britain can't reconquer us, and we will have a united Columbia as a free democratic society. Oh, and when we're done, I was thinking maybe we could build a ship canal around that pesky part of the Richelieu River, and I will make Burlington a seaport that will trade directly with France. Our products to you, your products to us, everybody profits. Well, the Directory really likes this idea. They're serious about no more monarchy. They're serious. They really want to get back at England, whom they hate with a passion. And they have tens of thousands of guns that are useless to their army, because an Austrian gun is not interchangeable with a German gun, which doesn't work with an Italian gun. And they've gotten these guns in the course of their various wars around Europe. So they give Ira 20,000 muskets and 24 cannon. They give him startup capital. They give him bonds on the Batavian Republic, which they had established in Holland. And they give him paperwork saying that he paid for all of it, just a business deal right here. And the reality is he didn't pay for anything. He didn't have any money, and the French didn't need any money. They just give him the gun. They know if he gets in trouble, he's got to have paperwork. So Ira loads 15,000 of the guns on a small American ship, which is a great name for a gun runner. It's called the Olive Branch. And you can't get the cannon on. He has to leave some of the guns behind. He sails across the Atlantic to fame and fortune. Unfortunately for Ira, MI5, MI6, whatever the heck it's called over there, had predecessors. There must have been an 18th century James Bond in Paris, because they know what he's doing. They send a warship after him, and the HMS Audacious captures the Olive Branch 3 weeks out across the North Atlantic. They haul him back to Portsmouth. They unload the ship. They put the guns down as close to sea level as they can so they'll rust out real quickly. And then they torture him to death. They put him in the British court system. Anybody else in this room read Bleak House in high school or college? Jarndyce versus Jarndyce, the longest running court case in British legal history, is the center of that novel. I think Dickens just read what happened to Ira and changed the names. The Brits keep him in court for well over a year. They give him a judge who hates Americans and says so every morning at the opening of the court session. And they just batter him with legal arguments. Well, yeah, sure, you've got bills of sale here, but they're not notarized, are they? Oh, yeah, that looks like that's good, but the comma's in the wrong place, isn't it? And on and on. He has time to write a history of Vermont, which he publishes in London, much of which is why there should be a ship canal on the Richelieu. And finally, after more than a year, they say, all right, you're close. Just a little more paperwork from France and you'd be okay. And he makes the worst decision of his life. He goes back across the channel, back to Paris, thinking that his pals in the Directory will help him again. He didn't understand that the wheel of fortune has turned about 9 times in Paris. His friends are dead or exiled. The new leaders look at him and say, sneaky little guy, comes direct from England with English approval, doesn't speak a word of French, we don't know him, British spy. They throw him in prison. They don't charge him with anything. Habeas corpus is a bit shaky in revolutionary France. And they just leave him there. And he rots for over a year in 2 Parisian prisons. In those days, in Paris and most of the rest of the Western world, you don't pay for your food, you don't get any food. So he lives on handouts from Americans in Paris for diplomacy, for business, for whatever else. His health suffers tremendously. He's in his 50s by now, and he's in sad, sad shape. He writes plaintive letters back home to Vermont. I'm about to get out of here. When I get out, we'll bring the guns and we'll do business, and no revolution in Canada, it looks like, but we'll sell them to the state militias. We'll make a lot of money. It's all pie in the sky. And then the French let him out. They don't say why. Apparently just, we need to sell, get out. His health is so bad he can't think about crossing the Atlantic for another year. And the French help that out by not being willing to give him exit papers. They don't want him in prison. They don't really want him in France, but they don't like him enough to really encourage him to leave. He finally gets on a ship, sails back to Philadelphia. He lands there in January of 1801, makes his way back to Vermont in the spring of 1801. He's been gone for 5.5 years. He told Jerusha he'd be gone 6 or 7 months. And he gets home and it's all in ruins. There's nothing left. Other speculators, and there are a lot of them, have said, well, he's got a deed, I got a deed, my deed's better than his deed. They're suing him. He hasn't paid his taxes for the land. It's a terrible, terrible situation. He fights for a year. He gets the legislature, and this is moderately common, to give him a year's immunity from imprisonment for debt. Because if you're in the late 18th, early 19th century in Vermont and the rest of the United States, somebody has a claim against you and has an in with a judge, they have you thrown in debtor's prison. And you don't get out until you pay your debts, which you can't pay while you're in prison. It's a nasty circle. The year doesn't help. He doesn't get anywhere. It's just as bad. More lawsuits, more debtor, more creditors. He asks for another year and the legislature stiffs him. Now, you're bankrupt. Anybody can see this other than you. Give up. And he refuses. He writes to his creditors, many of whom are Chittenden County, and says, all right, I've got a solution. Come to my house Thursday night, reception, party, all your claims will be answered. They come over, they get into his front parlor, they eat, they drink. Ira goes out the back door, gets on a small ship, down the Winooski River to Lake Champlain, and this time he goes north, or south, I'm sorry. Goes south instead of north. He goes all the way to Kentucky because there's a loophole in the federal bankruptcy law, which says if a local of good standing will swear to a judge that nobody has a claim of $50 against you, then you can be immune from imprisonment for debt. Well, Matthew Lyon is living in Western Kentucky, former congressman, Revolutionary War, son-in-law of Thomas Chittenden. He's a pal, and he's a big deal. He's about to be elected to Congress from Kentucky. And he perjures himself unmercifully and says, no, I don't think Ira owes anybody any money, Judge. And the judge says, well, that's good enough for me. We have a lot of respect around here for Matthew Lyon. And he grants him immunity, which is really useful in every state except Vermont. He comes back here. Some creditor will find some judge to throw it out and put him back in jail. So he goes to Philadelphia, And we're not really sure why, but he spends the last decade of his life in the city of brotherly love. He has very little money. I think the Batavian Republic bonds give him some cash. Bad boarding house, worse boarding house, worst boarding house. His health declines badly. He keeps publishing. He writes books and pamphlets about the olive branch affair. It's well over 1,000 pages, and it is disjointed, it is incoherent, it is illogical, and I will save you having to read all of this. The entire point is somebody owes me. I got stiffed in the olive branch affair, and I want to get paid, whether it's France or it's England or it's the United States or it's somebody else. I get back on top when I get what I deserve. So it's a bad, bad 10 years. And then in the last 6 months of his life, he's reborn. This is the age of Simón Bolívar and the revolutions in Central and South America against Spanish authority. 3 Spanish-American mercenaries come to Philadelphia, and somehow they wind up at Ira's boarding house. And their goal is a revolution in northern Mexico, what's today's Texas. This is 1813, and Ira is rejuvenated. He says, revolution? Guys, do I know revolution? I was a leader of the revolution in Vermont, and we got our own state out of it. And I had a great one going in Canada till those stinky Brits caught me. You guys, raise your money here in Philadelphia. Get going down south. Here's some good advice. Take a printer and a printing press with you, because you'll win more hearts and minds with the power of the press than you will with bullets. And he finds them a New England printer who goes down and does the first printing in what is today Texas. And he said, and when you win and you've got that new democratic republic, I'm your ambassador to the United States. He's on the way back. Well, the Gutierrez de Lara expedition goes south, gets clobbered by the Mexican soldiery. It's 23 years too early before Davy Crockett and Jim Bowie and the Alamo. It never has a prayer of success. I think it's good that Ira dies before he finds out, before word comes back. He dies in hope, which I think is a better thing than dying in despair. He dies in January of 1814. He is 62. The attending physician puts down retrocedent gout as the cause. I think it would have been just as accurate to say he wore out. He never recovered from the year in French prison, and he dies in utter poverty. The Quakers have to come and collect his body and bury it for free in the Free Quaker Cemetery. And I've looked for 40 years in Vermont, one mention of his death. The Burlington Weekly Sentinel is the Burlington 4-page newspaper. 3-line obituary: died in Colchester, General Ira Allen, died in Philadelphia, General Ira Allen, late of Colchester. And that's it. 20 years after he set out to go to England and to France, he's in the shadows of history. By 1814, Vermonters who remember him at all are thinking, Ethan's younger brother, we think. Sneaky little guy, we think. But he's in the shadows, and he stays there, because Vermonters don't, in the succeeding generations, much want to bring him out. We can't idolize him. He's not the shining figure. So we leave him there. He gets a biography in the 1920s by James Wilbur. Some of you are going to want to ask me 2 things. Why is there a statue of Ira at UVM? And why is there an Ira Allen Chapel named after a guy who never went to church? James Wilbur will figure in my answer. Again, we're back to my opening point. You don't have to like this guy, but he's so important. He is the Vermont exemplar of the frontier speculator, the frontier visionary. 99 out of 100 of us then and now are happy not to aim very high, not to risk much. Congenial mediocrity is just fine with most of us. We need the Ira Allens. We need the guys who see a wilderness and say, Burlington someday will be the biggest city in Vermont. I can see it. I can see that university, the shining city on the hill, when you guys are just chopping down trees and hoping to make it through the winter, get a crop in. The frontier visionaries almost always fail. It's too early. Their vision, they don't have the capital to bring their vision to fruition. It always happens. It's the next generation or two that succeed at it. But I love those guys who don't look at the world as it is and ask why, who look at the world as it might be and ask why not. Robert F. Kennedy. Those guys are real important, and Ira is, whether it is politics or finance or land speculation or community development or commerce. You got a weak picture of early Vermont without Ira. The only thing he doesn't have a hand in is religion. He's a deist, like his brother. He believes in a God of nature. He doesn't believe in churches or priests or ministers. Again, why is there a chapel at UVM? So get him in the picture, if you will. This is a way to do it. James Wilbur's biography was 800 pages. This is about 300, so I'd recommend this one. I think it's more readable as well. And I'll give you three things as possibilities. One, I think you'll have a good time, because Ira's pretty interesting. You guys are members of a historical society. Presumably you like history. Ira's story is an interesting story, so I think that will happen. Two, I'm pretty sure you're going to learn a lot more about early Vermont with Ira on your knowledge base than without Ira on your knowledge base. And three, whether Ira watches you from up there or down there, I'm absolutely certain he'll enjoy the attention. Thank you. So, hold on, I'm not done. We move on to questions, rebuttal, if I have offended your sensibilities, and short speeches disguised as questions so you can show your neighbors how smart you are. This happens about every 10th talk. It's always a man. The women never do this, but there's every 10th talk, there is an expert on something that has nothing to do with my talk. And by God, they're going to give a speech about it. You.
What's the story on the map?
The map came out and set 1 year after Vermont declares its independence. Bernard Romans is an American by adoption. He's a surveyor. He's a military engineer. He does other maps. He's with Benedict Arnold at Ticonderoga. So he knows Vermont. And somehow he decided that state of Vermont, right in the center, this is a political statement more than just a geographic representation. And I would add this. This text block says that Vermonters are brave yeoman farmers yearning to breathe free. Yorkers are stinky land speculators and princes of land jobbers. It's telling you that the Vermont cause is just. And I think when you looked at that in London or Paris or Williamsburg, Virginia, it gave you a stronger sense that Vermont was for real and ought to be for real. That's more effective than a pamphlet. Remember, this is a pre-electronic age. You've got nothing you can look at on television or Kindle or your laptops or whatever. This is the way you make arguments and you transmit information. Romans maps are $30,000, $35,000 today in good physical condition, if you can find one. You go to an urban map dealer, he'll find you one within a year, but it's not cheap. And we did this reprint in 1984 when we published The Shaping of Vermont, a book about early Vermont maps and map makers.
So there's reprints of that available?
I'm sorry?
There's reprints of that?
Yeah, that one might cost you, I don't know, $10.
Yeah.
But it's not real.
And what's the reason for the orientation?
It's not unusual in the 18th century. I would guess maybe 10–15% of the maps of the 18th century, for some reason, decided that north could go that way. It screws us up entirely. All of us have known all our lives that north is up. That's just all there is to it. Well, in the 18th century, there are other examples. I like it because it means Vermont is not vertical for your eye to catch it. It's right there in the middle. It's, again, to me, that's political rather than geographic. Sir?
Ira Allen Chapel was built, I'm guessing, in the 1920s.
Yep, late 1920s.
And how did it get its name, Ira Allen?
Well, in the 19-teens, a very wealthy Westerner, James Benjamin Wilbur, moves back. We don't know why. He decides to settle in Manchester, Vermont. If you know Manchester, the Wilburton Inn, which is about 3 times the size of this building, that was his house. He was very well-to-do, and we don't know why he decided to adopt early Vermont history as a collecting specialty with a rich man's budget, and Ira Allen as a research subject. And he came into it with the absolute certainty that Ira Allen was a saint, that every single thing Ira Allen did was perfect and wonderful, and by God, James Wilbur was going to let you know about it. His biography, I think, is very good on what Ira did. If Wilbur knew that on July 14th, 1792, Ira was in Bennington, he told you that. So what happened, he's real good on. It's the why and what we used to call the so what. Why does it matter? He's not so good on because it's all under the color of my hero, my saint. I hope mine is...
So who funded the building?
Well, James Benjamin Wilbur.
Oh, he did? Okay.
Guy Bailey is president of UVM, 1919 to 1941, the longest presidency at UVM. And Bailey is a master fundraiser. He finds out that Wilbur is working on Ira Allen, and we know, we've heard from me, Ira's prominent role in getting UVM going. And Bailey starts writing to him, "Gosh, Mr. Wilbur, you're so smart. You're really something. How'd you like to be on the board of trustees?" "Oh, good, that's really great." "A statue? You'd like to put up a statue of your hero?" "Oh, that's terrific." Anybody who's been on the campus as students, you walk by it every day and pay any attention to it. What do you want the plaque to say? "Founder of this university, founder of the state of Vermont"? Great, let's put the plaque up. Neither of those is true, but it was Wilbur's money. And then he says, "Gosh, you know, a real university, a New England university, needs a classical building for a chapel." And right there on that northeast corner of the green is the perfect spot. "Would you build it for us?" "You will? Who do you want to name it after?" "Ira Allen." "Oh, that's just great. We're going to name it after Ira Allen." And again, I mean, that's kind of ironic to me that she might as well, I don't know, name it after somebody who... Ethan says in Reasoning on the Oracle of Man, "I don't think I'm a Christian except that I was baptized." I think that's how Ira would have looked at it. So you name your chapel. In the day when you were required to go to chapel as a UVM student, after Ira. So that's the reason. Wilbur also builds the back half of Fleming Museum. Not the Colchester Avenue front, but the back half. They ran out of money. He builds the back half as a home for his Vermont collection, which he leaves the university when he dies. He also leaves the university $3 million in cash in 1930 dollars. That's probably $100 million today, which would make it the biggest gift UVM has ever received. But he does it with a restriction. He says, I like UVM the way it is. Vermont's population hasn't changed in a century, which was true in 1930. So as long as you keep arts and sciences under X students, you can keep my money. Well, of course, by 1940, the state's population starts going up rapidly. Today it's 650,000. It's about almost double what it was in 1930. Arts and sciences starts growing. UVM has to throw departments out of arts and sciences to keep under the number. Well, chemistry, that's not really a science. Throw that one out. Art, that's not really art. We'll throw, and it gets terribly convoluted. Finally, the university, they're afraid of getting sued by the Wilbur family. They get Warren R. Austin, America's first ambassador to the United Nations, former US Senator, UVM graduate, green and gold. And he says, I'll find us a judge. I'll find somebody who will say it's all right. Austin is famous, some of you probably know this, during the first Arab-Israeli war. He says, I don't understand why those Jews and Muslims can't come together in a good Christian fashion and settle their differences. Man of stature. He does find a judge, and the judge says, Mr. Wilbur would have understood. Keep the money. The family promptly sues, and they lose in the end, probably because Austin found another judge that would rule for UVM. So that's why. That's why and I was curator of the Wilbur collection. It was the Wilbur collection of Vermontiana. They've changed it now to Vermont Research Collection, which guy gives you $3 million. Keep his name on it, for God's sake, my opinion. All right, others, more. You're worn out. I can tell. Yes, ma'am.
Yankees, I always think of, Yankees, New York, but you were using the Yankees term more for New Hampshire.
I'm using it for New Englanders. In the 18th century, it was Yankee versus Yorker was the alliterative term. And in my childhood, certainly in the 60s, Yorker was a swear word in Vermont. I was born in New York, so I don't use it as much anymore. It's a curious thing because throughout my life, half the people who live in Vermont were not born in Vermont. We have one of the most fluid, mobile societies in the country. You go to Kentucky, where I worked for 4 years, 80% of Kentuckians live in the same county they were born in. They do not move. They're not going, they will take a job 100 miles away and make the drive, because they are not leaving. But Vermonters come and go, and probably half the people in this room, I would guess, are. How many of you are native Vermonters? Okay, maybe half, maybe 60%.
I was born in
Yeah, if you're not born here, I'm Frank Bryan, my friend and colleague at UVM. There was no, he was from Newbury, Vermont. There's no hospital in Newbury, so Mom had to go over for pregnancy and be born. He was born in New Hampshire. He was there for a day and a half, and he's still not a Vermonter. But I do these talks all over the state, and I've done them in more than half the towns in Vermont. A considerable amount of the energy that goes into organizations like the Bridgewater Historical Society is from the newcomers. And I see the Historical Society as a bridge between the native and the newcomer. The natives are proud of their heritage. They might be suspicious of the new person in the Beamer with the McMansion, but if that person joins the Historical Society, they have a common interest in the local heritage. And I think that's really important. And that's not the case in Kentucky, believe me. Outsiders are The worst thing you can call somebody in Kentucky is a Yankee. I heard that a lot in my 4 years. I was the head of the Historical Society. You don't understand Southern tradition. It's true. You, sir, you had your hand.
Yeah, you mentioned the Alamo. I was astounded to walk in the Alamo because the flags of all the people that participated are in there. There's a Vermont flag in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Miles to Forest and Ross.
Yes. Yeah. There are something like 7 or 8 Kentuckians.
Yeah.
Yeah, they came from most of the states in the Union. Yeah. Back in 1991, when we celebrated our 200th anniversary of statehood, I proposed that I came out with a book about why Vermont was distinctive and unique, and a Texan came out with a book about why Texas is distinctive and unique. And I proposed to the Vermont Humanities Council, these are the only 2 independent republics in American history. Send Vermonters down and do talks on what Texas can learn from Vermont, and bring Texans up what Vermont can learn from Texas, which I thought would have been a lot of fun. And Council on Humanities didn't think it was a very good idea. So when I win the lottery, these places are going to take me a lot more serious. Anyone else? Yes.
Ira Allen have any children?
Yes. This is a question that some folks ask. What happened to Jerusha and the children?
Yeah.
Ira dies in 1814. He's 62. Jerusha is still in her, oh gosh, mid-30s? No, early 50s. Yeah, she's maybe 50 years old. They have 3 children. Zimri, who dies young, he's studying to be a doctor at Middlebury College. Maria Juliet is a 14 or 15-year-old, dies at a girls' academy in St. Albans. And Ira Hayden Allen, eldest of the 3, survives. He and his mother, 1814. Dad is bankrupt as anyone can be. When they marry in 1789, Ira's wedding present to Jerusha is the town of Irisburg, 35,000 acres of wilderness. And I'm sure she looked at it and said, huh? No Mercedes, no Cuisinart, no something that I could actually use. But she owns it, and she keeps it separate, and she pays the taxes on it. And in 1814, she and her son moved to Irisburg, and they developed the town. She donates the town green. If you've ever been in Irisburg, it's a nice little town green. Jerusha lays out the town. They build their mills. They lease their land. And Ira Hayden Allen, by the time of the Civil War, is the richest man in Orleans County. No adventure. Never takes a chance in his life. The dullest life you can imagine. But he achieves the financial success that his father and his uncles had dreamed of and did not get to. So that's the next generation. And let's see, we're in August. In 1984, a great-great-great-granddaughter of Ira's graduated from UVM, and they took her picture in front of the statue. This May, her daughter graduated from UVM, and they took her picture in front of the statue. So the Allens, the name dies out in Ira's line because it's daughters rather than sons. And everybody knows, if you want to be a descendant from an Allen, you want to be descended from Ethan. And I've lost track of the numbers of people who have told me, I'm a direct descendant of Ethan Allen. No, you're not. The genealogy is pretty clear. You can prove it or disprove it. David Souter, Supreme Court Justice from New Hampshire. I served on committees with him in Washington. He's the only person I've ever met who said, I'm a direct descendant of Ira Allen. Can you verify? And I checked, and no, it's not true, David. I'm sorry. I wanted to say to a Supreme Court Justice, yes. It turned out it was a different branch. Allen is a fairly common surname. It's not noble and distinctive like Graffagnino. So. Graffagnino is the 35,000th most common surname in America. Smith, Jones, Brown, etc. All in the top 10. Graffagnino's are down there at 35,000.